Linda, the HOA says you're running a business from home without a permit. My neighbor's voice cracked over the phone, and my heart sank as I gripped the kitchen counter, feeling the weight of disbelief settle around me. Before we start the story, leave a comment telling us where you are watching from, and at the end don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10, enjoy the story. I had spent the morning organizing my home office, carefully stacking invoices, aligning folders of client information, and setting my schedule for the week, completely unaware that my mother-in-law, Carol, had been sending letters and emails behind my back. The sun streamed through the blinds, casting stripes across the hardwood floors, and I could hear the faint hum of my computer, the only witness to my meticulous routine. I paced slowly to the window, trying to gather my thoughts, noticing the empty street and the way the shadows of the trees danced across the driveway, imagining the judgment in the board members' eyes even before I had a chance to meet them in person. I remembered the last time Carol had visited, a seemingly innocent lunch, her questions about my clients' schedules, her casual comments about zoning regulations that I had dismissed as small talk, never imagining they would be weaponized. Now, each detail felt like a warning I had ignored, every smile and nod a piece of a puzzle that was finally coming together in the form of a formal complaint against me. I opened my mailbox, half expecting to find another letter from the HOA, and there it was, crisp and official, the letterhead of the board stark against the cream-colored envelope, summoning me to a hearing next week to provide evidence and explanations for allegations I hadn't committed. My stomach churned, but my hands remained steady as I ran a finger along the embossed edge of the paper, feeling the gravity of the situation without panicking. I set the letter down on the polished oak dining table, noting the faint reflection of the chandelier above and the neat lines of the china cabinet, and I realized that the room that had always been my sanctuary now felt like the stage for a confrontation I hadn't anticipated. I took a deep breath, recalling the many mornings I had poured coffee for my husband, the evenings spent reviewing his old business plans, the way I had balanced my home and work life with careful attention to detail, and I felt a surge of quiet determination rise within me. Carol had chosen this moment to undermine me, to plant seeds of doubt, but I would not react impulsively. I reviewed the HOA rules one more time, tracing the paragraphs with my finger, familiarizing myself with every clause, every restriction, every possible point of contention, preparing myself to answer with clarity and calm. I thought of the clients who relied on my guidance, the trust they had placed in me, and the dozens of hours I had spent building my small but legitimate consultancy from my home office, all perfectly legal under the city's zoning laws. I could imagine the looks on the board members' faces when I presented my organized files, my receipts, my scheduling logs, every piece of evidence that would silently but undeniably reveal the truth. And as I sat in the quiet of my living room, the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the faint scent of polished wood, I allowed myself a small, controlled smile, knowing that while Carol had initiated the conflict, I held the power to reveal the truth without raising my voice or compromising my dignity, letting the law and facts speak louder than any accusation she could throw at me. The day passed slowly as Linda sat at her dining table, the sunlight shifting across the room in uneven patterns, highlighting the stacks of documents she had prepared for the upcoming meeting with the HOA. She methodically went through her schedule, making sure each client appointment was logged, each invoice matched the correct service, and every correspondence accounted for. The hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock were the only sounds in the house, a quiet that contrasted sharply with the turmoil she felt inside. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the aroma comforting and grounding, and sipped it slowly, letting her thoughts settle. Every email from the board, every note from neighbors, and every interaction she had witnessed over the past months replayed in her mind, forming a pattern she could now understand with clarity. Carol's questions, her pointed remarks, and the subtle ways she had observed Linda's work habits were no longer benign, they were the pieces of a deliberate attempt to cast doubt on Linda's character and business practices. Linda made notes in a small notebook, listing each interaction, each observation, and each document that could serve as evidence to protect herself. She recalled the zoning regulations for her neighborhood, the clear allowances for home-based businesses, and the meticulous records she had maintained since opening her consultancy. She drafted a plan for the hearing, outlining the points she would present, the order in which she would display her evidence, and the manner in which she would speak, calm and composed, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. Linda also considered the potential reactions of the board members, imagining the questions they might ask and how she could respond with confidence, never raising her voice, never showing agitation, but demonstrating competence and transparency. As the afternoon waned, she walked through her home, observing her workspaces, her office, the neat stacks of folders, and the careful labeling of files, each one a testament to her diligence and professionalism. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the truth was on her side, that her careful record-keeping and honesty would stand up under scrutiny. The house, once a source of solace, now felt like a stage, each room a setting for the unveiling of the truth, and Linda felt ready, her mind clear and focused, prepared to face the board and calmly dismantle the accusations laid against her, leaving no doubt about the integrity of her work and the baselessness of the claims made by her mother-in-law. Linda arrived at the community center for the scheduled meeting, carrying her meticulously organized binder filled with invoices, client correspondence, and appointment logs, each page a silent testimony to her dedication and professionalism. The room was quiet when she stepped inside, the fluorescent lights casting a soft glow over the conference table where the board members sat, scanning documents and typing on laptops. She set her binder down carefully, the leather cover making a subtle thud against the polished surface, and took a seat, adjusting the papers so everything was aligned perfectly. Carol entered shortly after, her steps hesitant, and the tension in the air became palpable, a subtle weight that Linda acknowledged without letting it affect her composure. She reviewed the names on the placards in front of each board member, recalling the brief introductions from earlier emails, noting who seemed attentive and who appeared distracted, and allowed herself a brief mental note of how each person might respond to the evidence she would present. Linda opened her binder, flipped to the first page, and began outlining her work from the beginning, tracing her schedule, her client interactions, and her compliance with zoning regulations, speaking clearly and deliberately, each word measured, each point factual, allowing the visual evidence to reinforce her statements. The board listened, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes, and Linda could sense the shift in perception, the subtle recognition that her business operations were fully within the legal boundaries set by the community guidelines. Carol fidgeted slightly, her attempts to interject met with quiet, polite acknowledgement from the board, which only emphasized the lack of substance behind her accusations. Linda continued, calmly presenting screenshots of emails, copies of invoices, and photographs of her home office, each item reinforcing her narrative and dismantling the unfounded claims piece by piece. She noted the careful attention of one board member, who asked for clarification on a specific document, and Linda responded precisely, using her own records to corroborate every detail without showing irritation or haste. The presentation proceeded methodically, with Linda maintaining an even tone, projecting confidence and transparency, while Carol's initial assertiveness waned under the weight of the verifiable facts. By the time the discussion moved to closing remarks, Linda felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her preparation and composure had conveyed not only the legitimacy of her business but also her integrity and attention to detail, leaving no room for doubt regarding the unfounded nature of her mother-in-law's claims. The board acknowledged her evidence, making notes on procedural steps and next actions, and Linda gathered her materials, careful not to disturb the organized alignment she had created, and glanced briefly at Carol, whose expression had shifted from confidence to reluctant acknowledgement of the truth unfolding before them. After the board meeting concluded, Linda walked back to her car, her binder tucked securely under her arm, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass from the nearby park, and the quiet hum of distant traffic created a subtle background as she reflected on the events of the day. Each step she took felt deliberate, a rhythm that allowed her to process the relief and satisfaction that had settled over her. She thought about Carol, standing near the edge of the parking lot, her posture stiff and her eyes avoiding direct contact, and Linda felt a calm sense of resolution. The evidence she had presented was thorough and precise, leaving no ambiguity, and the board's responses had been measured and professional, reinforcing the legitimacy of her operations and the baselessness of the accusations. Linda's thoughts drifted back to the hours she had spent organizing her documents, reviewing client files, and ensuring every detail was accounted for, realizing that her diligence had not only safeguarded her reputation but also strengthened her confidence in handling future challenges. She remembered the faint smile of one board member as she explained a particularly intricate part of her scheduling system, a subtle acknowledgement of her competence that she noted quietly with satisfaction. As she approached her car, Linda paused for a moment to glance at her reflection in the rearview mirror, noting the composure in her expression, the calm determination in her eyes, and the absence of doubt or fear that had briefly surfaced when she first received the complaint. The streets around her were beginning to empty as neighbors returned home from work and errands, and the familiar sounds of suburban life provided a comforting backdrop, grounding her in the reality that her home and her life were secure. She slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirrors, and took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the tension of the day release with each exhale. Linda drove home along the quiet streets, appreciating the familiar turns and the sight of her well-tended garden bathed in the warm light of the setting sun. Her mind wandered briefly to the subtle lessons learned, the awareness of vigilance required when trust is betrayed, and the quiet satisfaction of having met the challenge with poise and intelligence. By the time she pulled into her driveway, the sky had shifted to a gentle orange and pink hue, and she felt a sense of calm fulfillment, knowing that the day's confrontation had been handled with dignity and skill, and that the foundation of her professional and personal integrity remained unshaken. Once home, Linda stepped inside and let the door close softly behind her, the familiar click grounding her in the safety of her own space. She set her binder carefully on the dining table, now illuminated by the warm glow of the evening lamp, and ran a hand over the polished surface, feeling the smooth wood under her fingertips. She walked slowly through the house, observing the neat arrangement of her office, the framed certificates on the wall, and the small touches that reflected years of effort and dedication. Her mind replayed the day's events, the questions from the board, the clarity of her responses, and the subtle shifts in Carol's demeanor as the lack of evidence became apparent. Linda poured herself another cup of tea, inhaling the familiar aroma of chamomile, and settled into her favorite armchair by the window, where the last light of the sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting patterns across the carpet. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to reflect on the careful planning and preparation that had brought her to this point, and to acknowledge the quiet pride in handling the situation with poise and precision. The sounds of the neighborhood evening drifted through the open window, the distant laughter of children, the low rumble of a passing car, the soft bark of a dog in the distance, and Linda felt the contrast between the calm exterior of her home and the tension of the confrontation she had faced earlier. She thought about her mother-in-law, Carol, imagining her going home to process the events, and felt no rush to gloat or react. The facts had spoken for themselves, and the truth had been revealed without drama. Linda reflected on the lessons learned about vigilance and preparation, about the importance of thorough documentation and a calm demeanor in moments of challenge. She reviewed in her mind the steps she had taken to ensure that every aspect of her home office complied with local regulations, the meticulous record she had kept for clients, and the clarity with which she had presented her case to the board. Each element reinforced her confidence, her sense of control, and her ability to navigate conflicts without compromising her integrity. As the evening deepened, she moved to the kitchen to tidy up, setting the kettle back in its place, arranging the cups and saucers neatly, and noticing the gentle reflection of the lamp on the counter. Everything in the house reflected care, order, and stability, a tangible reminder that her life and work were grounded in honesty and diligence. Sitting back down in her chair, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, acknowledging the calm resolution of the day, the reinforcement of her own credibility, and the quiet confidence that the truth had prevailed in the face of baseless accusations. The next morning, Linda awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains, the gentle warmth of the sun creating long, golden beams across her bedroom floor. She moved quietly, careful not to disturb the calm of the house, and went about her morning routine with deliberate precision, preparing a pot of coffee and arranging a small breakfast on the kitchen counter. As the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the room, she reflected on the previous day, mentally reviewing each moment of the meeting with the HOA, the questions asked, and the calm, factual responses she had delivered. The house felt still and reassuring, the familiar sights of framed photographs, neat shelves, and organized spaces providing a sense of continuity and stability. Linda checked her email and found a brief note from the board, acknowledging receipt of all documents and confirming that the review of her evidence had begun. She smiled faintly, appreciating the efficiency and professionalism of the communication, and took a seat at the dining table, flipping through her organized notes to prepare for any potential follow-up questions. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint chirping of birds outside, and the distant sounds of the neighborhood waking up created a comforting backdrop as she sipped her coffee, letting the warmth and the routine calm her mind. She considered her mother-in-law, Carol, who would likely be contemplating the outcome and the thoroughness of Linda's preparation, and she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction knowing that her careful planning and methodical approach had neutralized the challenge without confrontation. Linda spent the morning reviewing additional client files, cross-referencing dates, and ensuring all documentation remained accurate and easily accessible, her movements precise and controlled, reflecting both her professionalism and her confidence. Each step reinforced the quiet power of preparation, the importance of attention to detail, and the sense of agency she had regained in her own home and life. By mid-morning, she felt a steady rhythm of calm and purpose, aware that the foundation she had established for herself, orderly, transparent, and evidence-based, was stronger than any unfounded accusation. The sunlight now fully illuminated the room, highlighting the neatness of her workspace and the subtle signs of care she had put into maintaining her environment, and Linda allowed herself a deep breath, appreciating the clarity, control, and dignity that came from facing a challenge with poise and intelligence, secure in the knowledge that truth and preparation had prevailed. As the afternoon settled into a soft, golden light, Linda moved through her home with a quiet awareness, noticing how the sun highlighted the subtle textures of her furniture, the clean lines of her office shelves, and the small details that spoke of years of careful organization. She checked the remaining client files, making sure every document was properly labeled and stored, each page a testament to the meticulous attention she had given her work. The telephone sat silently on the counter, a reminder that communication would soon resume with the HOA board for any follow-up clarifications, and she allowed herself a moment to plan her next steps with calm precision. Linda reflected on the brief exchanges she had observed during the meeting, the subtle cues from the board members that indicated their recognition of her thoroughness and the unspoken acknowledgement of the baseless nature of the complaints. Her thoughts shifted to Carol, who had arrived at the board meeting with an air of confidence that had gradually dissipated under the weight of the evidence, and Linda felt no gloating, only a quiet satisfaction in having relied on facts, preparation, and composure. She walked past the window that overlooked her garden, where the shadows of the late afternoon stretched across the neatly trimmed lawns and flower beds, and considered how each aspect of her daily routine, from maintaining the plants to organizing her home office, reflected a commitment to order and responsibility. Linda took a deep breath, letting the stillness of the house wash over her, appreciating the contrast between the calm within her walls and the tension that had briefly arisen from the false claims. She prepared a fresh cup of herbal tea, setting it carefully on the table beside her notes, and reviewed the timeline of her business activities, noting dates, client interactions, and correspondence, ensuring that everything remained documented and ready for any further inquiry. The act of reviewing, organizing, and confirming details grounded her, reinforcing the control she maintained over her professional and personal environment. As the sunlight softened and the first hints of evening began to color the sky outside, Linda felt a steady confidence, a reassurance that her diligence, patience, and measured responses had not only protected her reputation but also demonstrated the quiet authority she wielded in handling challenges with intelligence and composure. Sitting back in her chair, she observed the orderly arrangement of her home, the clarity of her workspace, and the subtle harmony that her careful attention had created, understanding that the events of the day had strengthened her sense of autonomy and underscored the value of preparation, transparency, and a calm, strategic approach to adversity. As evening settled fully, Linda moved through her home with a quiet confidence, the soft light from the table lamps creating gentle pools of illumination across the room she had organized so carefully. She glanced at her office, the papers aligned perfectly on her desk, the laptop closed but ready, and she felt the satisfaction of control and order settling over her. The calm of the house contrasted sharply with the tension of the prior days, and she welcomed the serenity, letting the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of traffic outside remind her of the ordinary life she had maintained even amidst challenges. She poured herself a cup of warm chamomile tea and carried it to the living room, settling into her favorite chair by the window, where the evening sky was painted in deep shades of orange and violet, the suburban streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Linda reflected on the interactions she had observed, the careful questions and subtle shifts in demeanor from those around her, and she recognized the quiet triumph in handling a difficult situation with dignity and preparation rather than haste or anger. Her thoughts returned to Carol, who had acted with confidence but lacked the foundation of evidence, and Linda felt no need for confrontation. The facts and clarity of her preparation had spoken for themselves. She allowed herself a slow, measured sip of tea, feeling the warmth spread and the sense of calm deepen, appreciating the ability to navigate conflict with precision and patience. Linda considered the lessons of the day, the reminder of vigilance, and the reinforcement that honesty and meticulousness could overcome false assumptions or accusations. She walked briefly to the window, observing the quiet neighborhood, the neat gardens, and the orderly homes, each a reflection of care and responsibility, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose in maintaining her environment and her professional integrity. Returning to her chair, she opened a small notebook to review future appointments, making notes with deliberate, even strokes, the tactile motion grounding her in both reality and preparation. The evening progressed gently, the quiet comfort of her home emphasizing the contrast with the tension that had previously existed, and Linda embraced the stillness as a confirmation that she had navigated the challenge effectively. Every document she had organized, every careful explanation she had provided, and every measured response had contributed to an outcome that reaffirmed her competence and the integrity of her work. As the night deepened, she sat back, letting the calm of her home and the clarity of her mind merge, understanding that she had met the situation with intelligence, grace, and careful preparation, and that the stability and order she had created would continue to support her in the days ahead. As the night deepened and the house grew still, Linda settled into her armchair with a sense of quiet accomplishment, the soft glow of the table lamp casting gentle shadows across the room and reflecting the ordered environment she had carefully maintained. She opened her notebook once more, reviewing the notes she had made during the board meeting, the steps she had taken to document her home office, and the thoroughness with which she had prepared every piece of evidence. The hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of passing cars provided a soothing backdrop, allowing her mind to trace the events of the day and recognize the subtle yet profound impact of her composure and preparation. Linda reflected on the delicate balance she had maintained, responding with calm precision to each question and concern raised, never raising her voice, never showing agitation, letting the facts and organized documentation speak for themselves. She thought briefly of Carol, who had entered the meeting with confidence that had gradually eroded under the weight of indisputable evidence, and Linda felt no need for triumph, only the serene satisfaction of having relied on intelligence and meticulous planning. Her gaze wandered to the framed photographs on the walls, the small tokens of years spent building a life grounded in honesty and dedication, and she allowed herself a moment to appreciate the continuity and stability of her home environment. Linda sipped her tea slowly, savoring the warmth and the ritual, noting how each deliberate action throughout the day had reinforced her sense of agency and control. She reviewed in her mind the documents she had presented, the chronological order, and the clarity that had made the board recognize the integrity of her operations, and she felt a steady confidence knowing that the challenge had been met and resolved without unnecessary drama. The shadows lengthened across the floors, the evening settling into a calm rhythm, and Linda allowed herself to simply sit and reflect, recognizing that patience, preparation, and quiet determination had guided her through a difficult confrontation. As she set the cup aside and looked around at the ordered rooms, the tidy office, and the neat lines of her home, she understood that her composure had not only preserved her professional reputation but had strengthened her sense of self-reliance and insight. In the stillness of the night, Linda felt a gentle reassurance, a knowledge that she had navigated the complexity of human dynamics with care, intelligence, and dignity, and that her home, her life, and the integrity of her work remained firmly intact and ready to face whatever challenges might come next.